Hare Krishna. Bringen wir beide ja Deutsch und Englisch. Wird schon richtig sein, ne? Oder? Nee. Taditam me vijayanti. Das klingt ja wie Bhagavad Gita. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Dana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari 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 Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet. Hare Krishna. So, wer versteht kein Englisch? Huh? Nee. Eins. Okay, who doesn't speak German? Okay, so we have to do in English. So, we will make a class in English. Dann braucht man eine Übersetzung für Matthias. Sanjay war gerade da, oder? Sanjay, kannst du für Matthias übersetzen? So, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, Verse 30. Ja? Schon da? Tat etan? Okay. Please repeat. Tat etan me vijanihi jatahang manda dhir hare sukham buddhyeya durbodham yosha bhavat anugrahat tat etan me vijanihi jataham mandadir hare sukham buddhyeya durbodham yosha bhavat anugrahat tat etan me vijanihi jataham mandadir hare sukham buddhyeya durbodham yosha bhavat anugrahat. Taditam me vijanihi mandadir Hare Sukam bodhyeya durbodham Yosha bhavad anugraha Taditam me vijanihi Yataham mandadir Hare Sukam bodhyeya durbodham Yosha bhavad anugrahat. Ladies. Taditam me vijanihi Yataham mandadir Hare Sukam bodhyeya durbodham Yosha bhavad anugrahat Taditam me vijanihi Yataham mandadir Hare Sukam bodhyeya durbodham Yosha bhavad anugrahat. Somebody else? Taditam vajanihi Yataham mandadir Hare Sukam bodhyeya durbodham Yosha bhavad anugrahat. Thank you. Word by word. Taditat. That same. Me. To me. Vijanihi. Please explain. Yatam. So that. Aham. I. Manda. Slow. Dihi. Whose intelligence. Hare. O my Lord. Sukham. Easily. Buddhyeya. May understand. Durbodham. Very difficult to understand. Yosha. A woman. Bhavad anugrahat. By your grace. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. My dear son, Kapila, after all, I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I am not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel transcendental happiness. Purport. Knowledge of the absolute truth is not very easily understood by ordinary, less intelligent men. But if the spiritual master is kind enough to the disciple, however unintelligent the disciple may be, then, by the divine grace of the spiritual master, everything is revealed. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur therefore says, Yasya prasadat. By the mercy of the spiritual master, the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavat Prasada, is revealed. Devahuti requested her great son, to be merciful towards her because she was a less intelligent woman and also his mother. By the grace of Kapila Deva, it was quite possible for her to understand the absolute truth, even though the subject matter is very difficult for ordinary persons, especially women. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Prabhupada Priyarasaya Jagannatha Yatra Anandamurtaye Bhakta Sukhaya Krishnodkirtanena Nrisinghena Rakshataya Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyade Shatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktashaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambujo Radhamadana Mohano Divyadvrindaranya Kalpadrumada Shrimadratangara Simhasanasto Shri Madrada Srila Govinda Deva Uprishtalvi Savyamana Smarami Shri Mandra Sarasarambi Vamsivata Tatastitaha Karsham Veno Svanai Gopir Gopinata Shriyastunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Keshavasya Vishnu Bhakti Paridevi Satyavatyai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, once again the verse. Taditan me vijanihi jatahang mandadir hare sukam budyeya durbodham yosha bhavat anugrahat. My dear son, Kapila, after all I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I am not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel transcendental happiness. So this is Devahuti talking to her son Kapila. And this is one of the most, I think the picture is here also. This is the cover of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto. Devahuti requesting her son to teach her and Kapila then explaining to her the Sankhya philosophy and devotional service. And it's one of the most interesting chapters of the Bhagavatam, or I thought when I read the Bhagavatam, one of the most beautiful passages where Kapila Muni is instructing her mother. Even technically the mother is superior to the son, still she requested him to explain to her spiritual knowledge and more specifically devotional service, Sankhya Yoga. And the interesting point here is, of course, or maybe also controversial point, might be that Devahuti is identifying herself here as being less intelligent. And the women folk, might take it maybe as an offense. How can you say women are less intelligent? But actually it appears in a few different places in the Bhagavatam and also in the Bhagavad Gita that this is stated as a matter of a fact. But what we also should not forget is that in the same Bhagavatam and in the same Bhagavad Gita, very often also the intelligence of woman is exalted. Especially in the Bhagavad Gita, there is the very famous verse where Krishna in the 10th canto says that amongst women he is intelligence. So it seems like a contradiction. So are women intelligent or not intelligent? So in a black and white perception of reality, it might seem like a contradiction. So women are either less intelligent or not less intelligent. but actually it can be both at the same time. And maybe it's part of our philosophy also, achintya bheda bheda tattva. But in reality it's more simple to understand. It's because there are different types of intelligence. So there are there's emotional intelligence, there is the ability to memorize. Some people, even some races have different qualities of memorization. For example, Japanese people, they're known to have photographic intelligence and memory. That means they can look at a page and they literally take like a photo of it in their memory. And so they have it stored, like a digital soft copy in their head, So, and other people have the intelligence where they read something, and if it makes sense, if it's it's more logical intelligence, if they understand it and if it's reasonable and it makes sense, then they memorize it. And other people, they read something, and if it's inspiring, then they memorize it. So like that, there's different types of intelligence, and you could say in different situations, different things might stuck with us depending on our capacity. So the words that are used for intelligence here are buddheya, buddhi, and there was another word I didn't know before, dihi, whose intelligence. So maybe it's not directly intelligence. But the direct distinction that is very obvious in the Bhagavad Gita is the distinction between buddhi and medha. So buddhi is the general word that is used for intelligence, the intellectual ability. And there Krishna is saying, and also here Devahuti is saying, me as a woman, I have less of it, not so much of it. So buddhi you can explain as very much, especially in this context, is analytical intelligence. So Sankhya Yoga is very analytical. Sankhya literally means to analyze, to dissect, to count the elements of nature, understand their hierarchy, their interrelation, etc. So buddhi is very much analytical intelligence. And medha, medha is the form of intelligence that Krishna is saying is the quality of woman that he represents. He's saying, when he's saying amongst women I am intelligence, and a few other things as well, but the word that he uses there is medha. And medha is a different form of intelligence. No, it's not analytical intelligence like buddhi. Medha can be explained in different ways. There is even a divinity, a form of Shakti, which is called Medha Devi. So this intelligence is not so much, it's not about analytical understanding, it's much more about, for example, social intelligence and emotional intelligence. And so, like that. So women are capacitated in a different way, and it's, you could say, one of the big dilemmas, or you could say controversial topics of modern day, where we try to artificially pretend that we're all the same. But in reality, there is a clear distinction between the bodies that we have. Of course, you could say the ultimate level of equality, or the ultimate level of emancipation. Prabhupada also uses this word actually in this connection. He says the real emancipation is spiritual emancipation. So emancipation means to be like free of any, structures of oppression and situations which might be not just. So the real emancipation is never going to happen within the material plane. Within the material plane, there's always going to be distinction and inequality and disadvantage, because we are conditioned by our past activities. So it's very immature and illogical to expect everybody to be equal, because we are not. Because we all have different pasts, different histories, and we are in a current situation because of our previous activities and previous deeds. So it would be naive, to say everybody's equal. We're not. We are completely different. We have completely different capacities and abilities by our intelligence, our body, our stature, our social position, etc. Where we are born, and which circumstances, and which families, and which country, all of this, and which body, size, gender, color, all of this plays a role how you experience reality or your life. So the real emancipation is when we transcend these bodily designations. Only really on the plane of the soul there is true emancipation and equality. On the level of the soul there is no difference, and that's the Bhagavad Gita also is talking about it, where it says that Pandita Samadarshinaha. So somebody who has knowledge or somebody who has true understanding perceives everyone as equal. An elephant, a brahmana, a dog eater, and a dog, they're all the same, because he sees the spiritual soul, the Atma, and the Jiva Atma, and the Paramatma within each body. And so there, on the spiritual plane, there is equality. On the material plane, there cannot be equality. And to try to create equality within the material plane, it's a very futile endeavor. It will never really happen. And I experienced it firsthand in Peru, where I was born. There was, the communists, they also tried. And in many ways, the modern agendas, of gender equality are directly linked to communist ideology as well. The communists, they try to create equality, Everybody's equal. Everybody's the same, But it's not the same, And very often they tried and they made, huge blunders. So in Peru, they made this land reform and they took away all the land from the rich people, all the land from the rich people and gave it to the poor people. So the idea was, it should be equal. Everybody should have the same amount of land, then everybody will be happy. But the reality was that the poor people had no idea how to manage the land properly. And then, the food production decreased and, people died of hunger and, And this is only one example. So many examples when we try to manipulate, the natural order of nature, you could say. In general, communism regularly did this. In China also, they decided to kill all these birds that were eating the harvest. I forgot it was a sparrow, no? Kill all the sparrows. They were chasing them, non-stop until they would, fall dead. They were not allowed them to eat. And when all the sparrows died, then the insects suddenly ate all the harvests. So the sparrows were actually eating a little bit, but they were creating a balance in the ecosystem. So that's very common that when we try to meddle and manipulate the natural order of nature, then we will end up with some, sometimes very dangerous consequences. So we should be careful. Sangri Bhagavan ki jai. So, we should be careful, and we should acknowledge our conditioning. So it's very important to make this clear distinction. We should not identify ourselves with the, we could say, material frames or status we have in society. But at the same time, those situations bring certain duties and consequences, and we cannot neglect them. So this is very much related to this conversation Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had with Ramananda Roy, where he asked Ramananda Roy, what is the goal of life? And Ramananda Roy first replied, the goal of life is to follow Varnashrama Dharma. So, there's 4 Varnas, 4 ashramas, and this was the first reply he gave. And that's certainly, you could say, the basic foundation that we should follow and have. And Varnashrama Dharma you can expand as understanding that we have a certain position in society, a certain duty, a certain, quality that we should follow. Guna karma vibhaga saha, Krishna says. So depending on our gunas, on our qualities that we have, our abilities and our karma, our activities, based on those two things, we are engaged in society. So we should be very much become conscious about our swadharma. What is our dharma? What is our, constitution? And based on this constitution, then we can be engaged, in our duties first, and then ideally in the service of Krishna as well. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as we know, rejected it and said, yeah, but that's not the final goal. What more is there? And then it went deeper and deeper, and deeper. And then, of course, we have this very famous verse where we chant every morning, actually. Those who do puja every morning, we chant this verse. I'm not a brahmana, I'm not a kshatriya, not a vaishya, not a shudra, not a sannyasi, a brahmachari, grihastha. I'm just a servant of the master of the gopis. So this is our real identity, this is our real position, and that's what we should ultimately try to identify with, to be a servant of Krishna in no matter in what situation. But nonetheless, we have to acknowledge our current material situation, and that would be Varnashrama Dharma. So it's not that we are, women or men. This is just a temporary body that we have, but we should be not in neglect or in oblivion what we have, what karmas we have, because if we neglect or we forget or try to suppress, our conditioning, then we cannot really make progress. It's actually it's very important to use the abilities and qualities that we have in the service of Krishna in order to make progress. And this is called in the Bhagavad Gita as Sannyas Yoga. So Sannyas Yoga is not what we might think first, that it means that you all have to take sannyas, to become renounced. Sannyas Yoga actually is interestingly translated as to use all our talents in the service of Krishna. So this is Sannyas Yoga. So you can only use your talents, and your unique abilities and qualities in the service of Krishna if we have, an understanding and are aware what we have, so to say. So if we try to make it all equal, then the variety, gets lost. So this is very dangerous. And again, I'll invoke one more time the communism. So the communism in China, they had the Cultural Revolution. So in the Cultural Revolution, they tried to make literally everybody equal. And anybody who was a little bit more, like an authority or a teacher or something, extraordinary, they persecuted them, and destroyed it, and tried to make everybody equal. Men and women, everybody wears the same uniform. Everybody the same. So in retrospect, many people realized this was devastating for the culture of China. A lot of the traditional culture, costumes, way of dressing, everything got lost, just wiped out. So like that, like we say, Prabhupada said very often, variety is the mother of enjoyment. So variety is the mother of enjoyment. So variety, it's what makes everything interesting and beautiful. So if everybody would be the same, uniform, is boring. So, but the main point Srila Prabhupada then makes in his purport is actually the not so much our individual, understanding, which is also important, but the main point Prabhupada emphasizes is the mercy of the spiritual master. He says that to understand the absolute truth is not very easy. It's very difficult to understand the absolute truth, actually. But by the mercy of a spiritual master, it can be revealed. So the divine grace of the spiritual master, this is strongly emphasized here. In this case, of course, Krishna or Kapila is both. He is the spiritual master and Krishna himself. But Srila Prabhupada quotes the verse from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur from the Guru Vastakam, the last verse. Yasya prasadhat bhagavat prasadam, yasya prasadam nagati kutopi, dayan stuvam sasaya shastri sandhyam, vande guru shri charanaravindam. So if we offer respect to the spiritual master 3 times a day, that means that we are always conscious, of the position of the spiritual master. By the mercy of the spiritual master, we can understand. So, or basically what this verse is saying is that if we please the spiritual master, Krishna will be pleased as well. So it's directly connected. You want to please Krishna, you please the spiritual master. So this is the, you could say, great mercy. The spiritual master technically is considered to be the external manifestation of the Chaitya Guru. So Chaitya Guru is the Guru, you could say Paramatma or Antaryami, the Lord in the heart, is always conscious of everything we do. Upadrashtanumanta. He's the one giving permission and is the one observing and is witnessing everything we do, think, feel, want, etc. So the super soul is very much aware about our true sincerity. So if we show true sincerity, the spiritual master will manifest externally. That's how it's explained. And in the next volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 4th canto, towards the end, there is this very famous story of Puranjana and Puranjani, which is an allegory, but makes a very, very interesting point. Puranjana means the embodied, So Puranjana is embodied. Basically, means he's, identifying with the material body, and everything he does is related to this body. And he's trying to protect the city of the 9 gates. So this is where this analogy comes, that the body is the city of 9 gates, because we have 9 entrances. So the 9 gates of the body, and he's trying to enjoy his life and become successful, like any, you could say, person who is motivated, to be successful within this material reality. And he's very attached, to sexuality and his wife. And then his next life, he's born as Puranjani, so he's a female now. And because he was, materially motivated, he still fulfilled his duties. So that she had as Puranjani in her next life, in his next life. So that's also an interesting point, so the body changes, the gender might change, so we are not the genders we have. And Puranjani, in her next life, had a very qualified and pious husband, very qualified, pious husband. And her husband was basically her guru, She learned so much from him, and she really loved him above everything. But he died prematurely. He died before her. And then Puranjani is, performing his final rites. So they retire to the forest. They're living in the forest alone. After living a royal life, they retire to the forest, like proper vanaprasthas. And he died before her. So she's very tired. She's very sad. She collects the wood, makes the final rites for her husband, and her body is burning, and she's burning inside and crying very piteously. She's crying and crying, but her lamentation is not only because of bodily attachment. Certainly there was a strong bond between both of them, but it's explained the main reason why she was lamenting was because she was missing his spiritual guidance. He was like a spiritual master to her, so she was missing him like her guru. And she cried so sincerely, with so much intensity and devotion, that an elderly Brahmana appeared. An elderly Brahmana appeared and consoled her, and said, Puranjani, don't cry, and he consoled her, and this elderly Brahmana then said something interesting. He said, I have been your advisor in so many lives, Sometimes you ignored me, sometimes you followed my advice. But I have been always there. I have been always there, and I've always been, ready to give you advice. And he says, we are like two swans on the Manasa lake. So the Manasa lake means the lake of the subconscious, of the chittas, or the mind. And we are like two swans swimming on this lake. And now you have cried with so much sincerity that I have come directly to you. So basically this old Brahmana is nobody else than the super soul. So the spiritual master is externally representing the super soul. And if we literally, Prabhupada says, if we cry like Puranjani for the spiritual master, if we have this intensity of devotion and attachment to a spiritual master, then 100% the super soul will directly talk to you, Prabhupada says. And then he actually even retrospects and gives the example of his own experience when his spiritual master passed away. When Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj passed away, it was very, very painful for Srila Prabhupada. We hear from many times he actually recounted this experience he had, and how much pain it caused Srila Prabhupada when his spiritual master passed away. It's at least as painful as when a parent passes away. Fortunately, I have not had to experience this yet, but I have a very good friend whose mother passed away, and prematurely, and the experience and the pain that you and the sobering, you could say, maturity that you reach when you experience something like that is it's very intense. So in a much more deeper sense, and especially in a spiritual sense, if the spiritual master passes away, it's actually an opportunity to really take shelter of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada says, he recounts in this purports, when the spiritual master, the great Acharya, passes away, there is great turmoil. So when Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj passed away, there was great turmoil, Prabhupada says. And then he says that the sincere disciples, who truly cry for the spiritual master, they will continue with the mission of the spiritual master. So that's what we also saw, that a lot of the original Gaudiya Math, disassembled into many small pieces, but there were a few branches of the Gaudiya Math, like Srila Prabhupada's and some of his godbrothers, who very proactively still continued with the mission of a spiritual master. But the main point I'm trying to make is that this, like Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he always used to say, ISKCON is a crying school. So you're learning to cry here. So this is what we're trying to do. We're learning to cry. The Hare Krishna mantra is actually a cry for help. Hare Krishna. Hare means, oh mother. Hara, universal mother, Radharani, please engage me in the service of Krishna. So Gaur Govinda Maharaj very strongly emphasized this point, that we should learn to cry. Our hearts have become hard, and we are not able to cry. So we should be able to cry. And we should not cry out of self-pityness, but we should cry for the separation that we have from Krishna, the separation, the feeling of separation from the spiritual master, from Krishna. If we feel this intensity, this is considered to be the first symptom of ecstatic love, or the first ecstatic symptoms. In the Nectar of Devotion, it is explained that when we feel remorse, at our tendency to be sinful, to be selfish, and thereby being separated from Krishna. When we realize that actually I have been so selfish, I have been so, absorbed and in self-pityness and egoism, and forgot completely to serve the Supreme Lord. When we have this realization and we feel this strong remorse, so remorse and separation is considered to be the first level of ecstatic symptoms. That's where it begins. It doesn't begin with, pure love straight away. It begins with remorse and feeling this intense, realization that actually, because of our actions, because of our consciousness and attitude, we have separated ourselves from transcendence. So if we fix this attitude, by being humble, by surrendering to a spiritual master, by chanting the holy names of the Lord, like it says, thinking oneself Lord in a street, straw in a street, being tolerant like a tree, ready to offer respects to everybody without expecting respect in return. If we really, correct the attitudes, then we will be able to, always chant the names of the Lord and really feel this connection. So, yes, by serving the spiritual master, by feeling this intense separation from the spiritual master, surrendering to the spiritual master, we certainly can get the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And like Prabhupada says here, where is it? 1 second. However unintelligent the disciple may be. So it doesn't matter, how incapacitated or unable we are. Actually, one word that's also interesting here, because the word Devahuti is using is manda. Yataham manda dir harihe. It says, "Oh Lord, Hari, I am manda and dihi, slow intelligence." And there's a very famous verse which used to be hanging here before. Now it's hanging in Golokadam. And this is the verse for Radha Madan Mohan. Radha Madan Mohan, very special deities. Srila Prabhupada brought them to Paris, but the Paris devotees were not ready to install them yet. So the German devotees took the chance and said, "Srila Prabhupada, please give Radha Madan Mohan to us." So they were installed in Schloss Rettersow first, and then they were many years here in the altar just behind me, and now they're in Golokadam. And the mantra, like we have there, the Nisingha mantra, there used to be the Sambanda Pranam mantra. So it's Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Mater Gati. Same word, Mamamanda Mater Gati. So in this verse, you take shelter of Radha Madan Mohan by realizing that I am Manda Mater Gati. I am slow, I am crippled, I am so unable. Please, help me. Lust, envy, anger, so many different negative qualities that we carry. And we can overcome them if we take shelter of Radha Madan Mohan. Radha Madan Mohan, Madan Mohan, he has the power to, overcome illusion, or lust also. He's the ultimate Cupid. Cupid, very powerful. He enchants everyone. The senses are very powerful. But Madan Mohan, he's more powerful. And then Radharani is Mara Madan Mohini. He can even attract Madan Mohan. So that's the same word here, Manda, the same word Devahuti is using. So we should be aware. It's a very healthy to be conscious of our inabilities, to be conscious of our shortcomings. We should not be self-piteous. It's very important. To be self-pity means it's called also the mouse ego. The mouse ego tends to become inactive. I can do anything. I'm useless. Okay, I'll do nothing. That's not the idea. The idea is to be honest about our shortcomings and then take shelter, like Devahuti is doing. We should take shelter of Radha Madan Mohan and the spiritual master, and they certainly will help us. Okay, I'll stop here. Maybe there are some questions, comments, corrections, anything. Willst du was sagen?
Just thought, because you said it's, can I give you the microphone? No. No? Okay.
That's good for some live stream.
Yeah.
Okay. I just thought because you gave the example of the mouse ego, it's not a point that if we feel or if we are aware of our inabilities or shortcomings, then we become inactive. I just thought of the example that if you are aware how small you are and then how incapable you are, but at the same time you are aware how great Krishna is and how all-powerful he is. It's like a small child who has a big brother. He's always a little bit proud and always how you say, selbstbewusst. It's always confident. Yeah, I can do anything, because I have this big brother and he will help me. And in the same way, a devotee also can be proud that we are in the position of servant of Krishna, and Krishna will help us. So it's like you said, it's a good mixture of being aware that we are so small, but at the same time, if we depend on Krishna, then anything is possible. And this is what great devotees they are able to do. Is so like Prabhupada, he was able to do such big tasks because he was very humble, but he was very confident that Krishna can do anything. So very nice.
Nice. I'll just end with one last thing that it said when we were Bhaktas, we learned in the temple we should be like sheep, very humble like sheep, Meh. And in the world one should be like lions. So, doesn't mean to be humble doesn't mean that you are, incapable or unmotivated. You should be like a lion in the world and like a sheep in the temple or at home. And very often we tend to be exactly the opposite. We're big tyrants at home, and in the world we're like quiet, nice. Should be the way around. We should be, ready to challenge, the materialistic worldview and, be proudly presenting ourselves as we are, with tilak. And I traveled so many years around the world, and I always traveled with tilak and dhoti. And it's nice. You encounter many situations where people are really appreciative, actually. So if we hide ourselves, then might take longer. So we should be humble like sheep at home in the temple and like lions in the world. So that's the combination we want. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.